Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Chuck Anderson with the Creative Collaboration Show. And this is the show where we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners who are on a journey to get their products, their service, whatever it is that they are selling out to the world and make a big impact. And most of the people that we serve are have world-changing ideas, big visions of how they want to improve people's lives. Now, as we encounter this journey of being entrepreneurs, there's going to be challenges along the way. One of those challenges is managing projects, managing tasks, managing team, managing employees. And today's expert guest is an expert in that, and not only helps people with their project management and their product launches, she actually helps us with ours as well. So today my guest is Elisa Boogaerts. She is a launch planner and strategist, helps coach, strategize, plan, and execute programs and launches in a structured and organized way so that you can focus on scaling your business. She has a combined 17 years experience in project management and coaching, and she uses that to help you launch. And like I said, she helps helps us with our team management and our launches as well. So Elisa, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jack, thanks for having me. I'm super excited that we got to do this. I
Yeah,
love that
it's
how we
like
worked
it's
together and it
like
was like, can I be on your podcast too?
I'm like, I can't believe you haven't been on the show already.
Yeah.
Usually that happens within the first couple of months of getting to know someone. You and I have known each other for geez, almost a couple of years now.
Yeah,
So it's about time. It's about time. So
here we are. It's perfect.
so welcome. And so I think a great place to start, we're going to dive into everything we want to talk about: project management and team management and staying organized and launching and all of those things. Um, how did it come to be that you find yourself in this role of being an expert and working with companies to help them with their projects? And so what's your origin story? How did it come to be that you're doing this now?
Well, like you said, I have the many years experience in it. So in my corporate career, I kind of like sort of fell into project management. I had a really good manager who was like, I think you'd be good at that. And it turns out I really am good at it. And then about 4 years ago, I launched my own coaching business and started doing my own launches and working in that. And so it was just sort of um I was keeping them very much separate. And then I quit my corporate job in 2023. And my business coach at the time was like, what are you doing with those skills? We kind of had this idea, and I talked to a few different people, and they were like, those types of skills are really needed in the coaching industry because there's so many people that just want to coach or don't necessarily have those business skills, or even if they do have the business skills, actually implementing it and planning and getting it done, getting it out there is it's sort of a gap that I've seen in so many programs that I've been in because I'm such a doer, I'm such a like a get it done kind of person. And so like I would execute on things and implement them. And some people, maybe even a year later, still hadn't done it. And so I was like, oh, that's like could be something that I could help people with because I had, my own experience of coaching and these skills. So sort of just kind of came to life in that way and being like, okay, well, how can I help people? And we sort of brainstormed and just kind of started working with people, more word of mouth. And then it took me a little while though, because in my mind, I was like, no, that's my corporate job. I don't want to bring that into my business, right? Because like to me, it was like coaching is such this wonderful, beautiful thing. And I love working with coaches. I love being in this industry. And to me, the corporate environment was kind of toxic and difficult, and I was like, oh, so like I kind of merged the two. I thought that project management, those two were kind of the same thing. And so it took me a little while to kind of change my mindset of it. And then I started to get really excited about it. And yeah, I've been working with people ever since.
It's funny. I've heard that part of the story so many times where we resist bringing what we're good at in the corporate world into our businesses. And look, funnily enough, I did the same thing, right? And it's like and I think part of that is that, we're moving away from something we're dissatisfied from, in, and moving towards something that brings us much, much more joy. And that idea of combining the two is like, no, I don't want that to infiltrate this, because now that's not going to have joy. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's great. And obviously, but then, that realization of, look, I'm skilled where I'm skilled, and my zone of genius is this. And that's what people really need from me. That's how I ended up focusing on the affiliate marketing and affiliate management side of things, because again, that's what I was doing so much of when I was a marketing director. So, we're kind of uh, experienced similar things there in terms of honing in on that zone. What was the turning
Yeah.
point for you? Like, so becoming a coach, you're trying to leave your corporate job. What was the turning point or the trigger that really said, you know what, I'm denying myself here. I really need to do that. Was it the conversation with the coach, or was there more to it like that that really got you on that path?
Yeah, I think it was that kind of like planted the seed, and I sort of like had thought about it. And then what I realized was that I love coaching, and through getting my, cuz I have like 4 coaching certifications, and I noticed that being a coach and coaching actually kind of gave me some anxiety and some stress a little about it. I think it was like I didn't relax into it enough to use my intuition with coaching, and it was always just like, oh, I need to like provide transformation, and I got to answer the questions right. It's like specific way you ask questions, and it was all like, and I had this really sort of perfectionism, good girl kind of mentality around it, and it kind of stressed me out. And so I think in thinking about that and being like, actually, well, project management and planning and organizing and strategizing and all that kind of stuff, that I find easy. And it kind of just flows. And I know that many people don't find that easy, and then that's where I sort of thought about that. And especially after I had quit corporate, I had more time to really kind of think about what I wanted and what I was doing. And I think that's kind of the realization that I had. I was like, oh, I think I fell in love with coaching, but not me coaching.
Mm.
So I think that was kind of like the defining moment, the difference. I was like, oh, maybe that's not meant for me to be a coach, but being in this industry and working with coaches is where that happy place is.
Hmm. What are some of the things that you notice coaches struggling with, or coming to you and asking you questions about in their business that they know nothing about, or they're struggling with, but this is something that you're perceived as an expert at this. But what are you hearing from them? Like, what do they need help with?
I'm hearing a lot that I don't know where to get started, that there's so much stuff to do, and it's so intimidating. This amount of things that needs to get done, especially if you're like, say it's your first group coaching program. Like a lot of coaches, if they go from a lot of coaches start at one-on-one and then they move into sort of group and starting to do launches, or they want to, even I help people with like launching podcasts or books, but I focus mainly on programs. And so there's just like, there's like, I don't even know where to start. And therefore then they don't, or that's kind of like lost on where, like what those steps are, and how to even, yeah, just get started, because then you can just kind of follow things step by step. But they feel like they sort of flounder a little bit, and then they get stuck in just really wanting to coach, or in creation mode, which creation mode is great, but then you also need to get it out there, right? You need to do the email marketing and the promoting and the all the things to make it happen. So I think that's sort of the number one thing that I hear a lot, is that like they just don't even know where to start. And it's just this giant puzzle, but all the pieces are separate, and they can't figure out how to get all those little pieces to fit to get their program out into the world.
Sometimes when we have designed projects, and then you start to get into the details of those projects, well, we need to do this and we need to do that and all of these things. And when you start to think of the project as a whole, it can actually be a little overwhelming, and can sometimes lead to that that thought process of, I don't know where to start, or do we do this, and how long is it really going to take? And um, I think it really takes someone who has the experience of doing that kind of planning, and that the estimation of time, because for that solo person who's out there, unless they've managed projects before, you're just guessing at everything, right? And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. What are some of the mistakes that you find that they're making that's kind of leading to this overwhelm or the confusion, or maybe even being stuck at the starting line with some of their projects?
Um, well, I think that one of the things is that they don't give themselves the time to actually sit down and think it through. And because that's something that is like I sort of love doing. I love the planning. So like when I launched my own podcast, I kind of did that. I was like, I just sort of like dived in and I was doing things and I was like, well, wait a second, what is the whole flow here? And to actually sit down and be like, okay, like as a podcast guest, what do I need? What are the steps? And as a host, what things do I need and what do I need to do to get it out? And so I like to really like go through that kind of, I don't know if you would call it like a story map or process flow to really think it through. And I think a lot of people just sort of dive in and kind of just like, oh, let's just do whatever. And it kind of becomes a bit chaotic because they don't really know what they're doing. And also, like you said, like we don't know what we don't know. And things can often take much longer than you think they're going to take. And then so things get delayed. And so I think that you actually sit down and think it through. Like I like to use this example as, you think, oh, I want to do a webinar. So I got to like, I'm going to do a webinar. Yeah, I can throw that together. Right. But then you think about all the little tiny things that need to happen. Right. There's so many little steps that you think you could throw together in a couple of days, but actually it might take you a week or two because you got to do all the landing pages and all the emails and the reminders and the marketing and the promoting. And like, there's so much more to it. And I think that, yeah, people just don't sit down to actually think through all the steps and be like, whoa, actually, maybe it's going to take me a little bit longer than I think it might.
Yeah, planning a webinar and setting a date is the easy part. And
Yes.
then there's all of if you want to do it properly, like you said, with the marketing it properly and sending the emails, and the big part where people struggle a lot, and especially in our world, is the follow-up, not
Yeah.
just doing the event but following up with everybody after the event, and really making sure that all of that happens, because that's where the money comes from. It's not just, oh, I'm going to do a webinar on Thursday, right? And
Right.
I caught myself numerous times, because I've done hundreds of webinars, and I still think, oh, yeah, I can just do one Thursday. I've done hundreds of webinars, no problem. But then when you realize, what I really meant is I wanted to do one on Thursday properly. And,
Right.
that does take some planning. Um, and so what do you suggest? Like, first of all, give us some examples of some of the types of businesses or coaches or business owners who are coming to you, and coming to you for help. Like, what's their situation? You mentioned their coaching and their books and other things, like, just so we can get a better sense of, like, you know who you serve and who you help. uh, who's coming to you for help.
Yeah, I get two types of coaches that come to me for help. So one is kind of, yeah, the newer coaches say in their first, 1 to 3 to 5 years of business where, yeah, they're looking to launch. Maybe they've done some launches before, but it hasn't gone as well. And so they really want to have more success with it. And so they come to me for that because it's kind of like, yeah, newer to them. And I teach them that process and that systems. And then other coaches that come to me are more established coaches who, are maybe making six figures, multi six figures, and they need either a project manager to come in and help them with the launch, or they kind of didn't. And this is actually a mistake that I find that people make is that they don't set up their systems early. So if you're starting out as a coach, you want to create systems so that things flow. And so as you scale, they're already in place. And so I find some maybe more established coaches or they grew fast and then they're like, oh, we are scrambling with everything all the time. Like every launch is just this chaotic running around like and so they're like, can you come in and help us streamline things, put in processes and like tell everybody what they need to be doing when they need to be doing it so we can actually because they could get it out, right? I mean, anybody can, especially if they have the established coaches and they have the resources, yes, they can launch. But was it good? Was it stressful? Was it like, like what was the state of your team? And is everybody burnt out afterwards? So kind of working with them to, yeah, to really sort of streamline that and make it more of a repeatable process that they can do over and over and improve on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, certainly with some of the coaches that we've worked with, the systems are kind of an afterthought of that. Oh no, I need this, right? Maybe I should have had this already, and so systems being created out of this, this necessity of just the phase of business they're in. Um,
Mm.
what's your advice for the coach who, to take a more proactive approach? Because, you know, versus reactive, where they're creating these systems of out of this necessity, or out of some issue that's been created.
Right, right. Yeah, is to get it started early. And I think one of the first things that I suggest is like having a filing system in place so you know where things are so you can find them easily. Because like so much stuff, we can spend so much time searching for things and searching and searching. And then if you can't find it, you got to recreate it. And then that takes more time and more money. And it's just sort of can be really frustrating. And so I think that's like something that's super basic and simple is like have a filing process, have folders, have them named, like have a structure. And then as you do scale, you can teach people what that system is, like where things go, so that you can just like, oh yeah, I know exactly where that is. I'll find it. I did have one of my clients said that he was doing a launch and the contractor that they had in their previous launch um, wasn't with them anymore, but did everything on their personal Google Drive, whatever email. And so it wasn't in a central place for the whole team to
Mm.
get access to it. So when that person left, they lost access to it. So they literally lost their intellectual property. And so the team spent a lot of time searching for everything. Where is all this stuff? Or could, did I receive that email that I could dig through and try and copy and paste it or, the swipe copy or what have you? And then they ended up having to recreate everything. And then they did put it in a proper like place where everybody could access it. But he estimates because that took so much time and therefore they weren't spending that time on other things, that they could have been doing for the launch. He estimates he lost about 50 grand
Wow.
in that launch.
Yeah,
And it's
and it's
huge. And
very
even if,
possible. Yeah.
yeah. And even if you're not that established coach and you're just starting out, like think about your time. Your time is valuable. So yeah, 50 grand is was like, ooh, that's a lot. Yeah. Let's get those systems set up.
It seems like some coaches even think that what you're talking about with project planning and even having systems and procedures and things like that are not for them at the stage of business they're in, but it's in that future stage when, well, I don't have any employees yet, or I don't have any contractors working for me. It's just me. So why do I need all of that?
Right. Yeah, exactly. 'Cause people don't really think about that future or I'll just, I had one person that called over and said, oh yeah, well, I'll just scramble. That's my plan. And I was like, okay, well, just to raise that risk of like the scramble, can cause delays of things or things to get missed or fall through the cracks or what have you. And so, um, yeah, I just think that because I'd like to believe that we're all going to grow and scale. And so even that solopreneur will eventually have, even if it's just a VA, right? Have things in a
Mhm.
place where your VA can access it. And, and you can even put some security around that as well. So they can only access that one thing. And because we will grow and scale. And so set it up now so that because then you won't even have to worry about it later. It won't be a thing. It'll just
Mhm.
flow, and then of course you're going to adapt it and change it as you scale. And maybe people come in, have different ideas, but you'll have that foundation. I really think it's part of the foundation of a business that not many people think about.
Yeah, and that's something that you were able to help us with as well, because the reality of we had a new product that we needed to deliver, and we had some things documented, but when it came to really training the team members to do that work properly, we definitely found some holes, some, misunderstandings that they had, and some tweaking that we had to do in that system. And it probably took a few weeks until that actually got dialed in, to the point where now I'm probably not even needed in those, in those, because the checklist is there and the procedures are there and people know what they're supposed to do. And now it's just kind of like, did the boxes get ticked? Did these things get done? And
Yeah.
now that opens, I find that opens me up for more. It's like, okay, well, what other things can I add to this process, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of like where we're at right now. So
Yeah. And I
really
think as
helpful.
well,
Yeah. Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
that, yeah, that it's something that I learned when I was in that corporate world was to, like, I even noticed that as we start talking about something and someone's teaching you something, that I always take very explicit notes for myself because sometimes we can learn so much or someone's showing you something, oh, you're like, oh yeah, 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 I can figure that out. Blah, blah. And then 2 weeks later, you can't even remember the beginning point. Like maybe you remember some of the steps or something like that. And so that's something that I do when I work with people. When I start hearing like, oh, click this, click that, I just like start typing the notes out so that we can have it, to for someone to reference just in case they may or may not forget. And I think that that's super handy because sometimes we need that super detailed, because there can be one click that you miss and then, it's wrong or something doesn't happen properly. And so, yeah, so sometimes you can get really super detailed in all of it.
Yeah, which, some people's brains are wired for those details and some people's are not. There are some that are more visionary and creative, and others that are more analytical and can really figure out all of the details, and others that are just like, okay, whatever, just let's get it done. And
Yeah.
if you're trying to fly the space shuttle, right, like, it's not like, oh, let's just build one and go. Like, it's not
Yeah.
exactly how it works. And but you do need to know like what are the steps, and some people enjoy that and some people don't. But it's the lack of detail, I think, that leads to so much procrastination in people. I tell the
Yes.
people in my group coaching program all the time, and I get asked, well, what do I do when I'm procrastinating? I say, well, what are you unclear about? Right? Like,
Yeah.
because um, usually it leads back to some sort of unclarity, and then an underlying fear of, what if I do the wrong thing? What if I do this wrong? Um,
Yeah.
do I have this right? All of that. And I think that's a sign, like if you find yourself in your business not executing an idea, is, I think that's a sign that you need Elisa's help or the help of a project planner to help you with the details, and keep things moving forward, right? Because you're great at helping us with the details, and also making sure that the team sticks to those details, because it can be a little overwhelming. And so anything you want to add to that? Because I think that is something certainly that coaches and business owners of really any kind will experience from time to time.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think even with myself, sometimes even in a day, be like, okay, what are my goals for today? What do I need to do for today? Or like, what are those sort of like tasks of today that I need to do? And, and I'll make a list for myself. But I feel like if I don't have that, sometimes I'll just be like, floundering a little bit, like, or I'll have like an extra 30 minutes. I'm like, oh, great, I got 30 minutes to do something. And then I'll end up clicking on stuff and kind of not doing anything, maybe read an email, where if I like had that list or I knew that task that I needed to do with that, that was like kind of specific, I could be like, okay, actually I have 30 minutes. I can get that done right now. And so I find that that really helps. And that's kind of what that plan checklist does is like all those little things and be like, okay, well, what could I do right now? So I find that that kind of helps with the procrastination, or at least like what I consider myself doing is that floundering around, just like, what? And then if I'm like, oh man, I just like wasted half an hour. I didn't even do anything. I'm not even sure if I read that email or, just like, and so I feel like it can really help you be more efficient. And
Yeah.
yeah, and in terms of procrastination, I mean, I love what you said about that it's, what is that underlying fear? There's something going on. And we all get it. Like even me is, because we all have different types of fears. And like one simple thing that I have is with writing emails, sometimes I never know what to put in the subject line. And then that's where I get stuck. And I'm like, oh, I'll get back to the email like some other time, and it's just the subject line that catches me out. I'm like, why do I like put so much emphasis on that? But I don't know, maybe I learned that somewhere that like that has to be the most important thing to get people to open your email. And so then that's where I sort of procrastinate. But that is like, you're like, well, what is the
Hmm.
problem? What is the missing piece? Okay, maybe I'll go grab that document that has 50 different subject lines that I could look at to help me out.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, we all procrastinate on something. And so yeah, maybe that's it. Just find the tools that can help you get through it. And remember
Yeah.
that they exist.
Tools are nice, but I think where we've made our biggest gains in the last couple of years is collaborating with others, right? And so, AI is nice, ChatGPT is nice. It helps with a lot of things. And look, if I have unclarity, I can ask it to give me a checklist, and it gives me a checklist.
Right.
Uh, Whether or not that checklist is right or not, who knows? Did it make stuff up? And then also, I think there's one other level, because having the checklist is one thing, but then having the motivation is one way of putting it, but just now executing on it, right?
Yeah.
And I think anytime where it's just me, it's easy to take my time with it, or put it off. But when it's the team, and the team's meeting every Monday morning, you have to have things done. And
Yeah.
even that part, that necessity or that responsibility has been great in moving projects forward. And I know for a fact that there are projects that we have done together that would not have gotten done if it wasn't for that and that structure. So
Yeah.
the
And the
tools are nice,
accountability
but I
too,
think
right?
having that accountability to another
Yeah.
human is a big part of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's like, yeah, especially with you're in that team, that collaboration, and you sort of know that other person's relying on you doing that, or you need to get something by a certain time. And that's something I also like to talk about, like to identify, we call them dependencies in the project management world. And it's like, okay, so you have to do this so that this person can do this. This person can't do this until you can do this, or this can't happen until this happens. And so just kind of making that clear. So then people know that there is that, like, oh, now I have this responsibility. If I don't do this, then the knock on effect could be huge. And so sometimes it's just making people aware of that, right? Like, this
Mhm.
is the risk if we don't do this because this is dependent on this other thing. Um, yeah, it's just sort of a different way of thinking that I like to make
So,
people
for
aware of.
anyone listening in now who is struggling with this, and you need a next step, a great next step would be to download Elisa's launch planning blueprint. You want to tell them a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So if you're not sure sort of where to start with planning your launch, and you really want help with that side of it. So you can just kind of like we were talking today, right? Like a little bit less stress and you kind of like know where to start and what to focus on. I think that's the really part, like what to focus on. You can download this free guides. Yeah, it's called Launch Planning Blueprint. And it's got teaches you like ways to plan. It gives you the high level things of what to plan as well for a launch. And it talks about goals as well for your launch because each launch kind of can have a different goal depending where you are in your business. And also has an event tracker in it, which is super handy for looking at your conversion rates, right? So say you have a webinar and you notice that, like 100 people click on the page, but only 5 people actually opted into the webinar. And you're like, oh, that conversion is really low, that percentage, right? 5%. What tweaks could I make to improve that? And then that can increase, more people coming to your webinars. You can just make little tweaks. So I find it really happy to calculate. So it calculates your conversions and then you can track them to make improvements to be even more successful.
Oh, amazing. Well, if you'd like to get a copy of Elisa's launch planning blueprint and you're watching this on video, just look right beneath this video. All her links are there. And if you're listening to this on podcast, just click into the player, whether you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you are, just click in there. All of her links there as well. Elisa, this has been amazing. We've covered a lot of ground, but also kind of only scratched the surface as well. And so I do highly encourage people to reach out to you if they need some help. And we've got your contact info in the show notes there as well, so people can easily find you. Now, before I let you go, I have one question I want to ask, and I ask this of all my guests, just because building a business, I mean, it does have strategy and tactics and tools and all the things that we typically talk about. But so much of it is about growing and developing ourselves as well. A big part of my journey in the last almost 30 years of business has been what I've learned from books And so I've certainly got my favorites. I wanted to ask you what your favorite is, and if you had a must-read book recommendation for our audience.
One of my favorite books, and I think it's sort of towards the beginning of my personal growth journey, was a woman written by Gretchen Rubin. She all talks about happiness, and it's called The Four Tendencies. And it's
Hmm.
about that she believes that there's four tendencies in the way that we respond to expectations. And I find it really handy to learn about them. And then so you can identify it in people so you know how to work with other people, especially in terms of collaborations. And if you start to build a team, what tendency they have towards expectations. So then you can change your approach with how you work with them or how you ask them for things, or, sort of setting guidelines of how you work together. I found it really interesting. And then I also noticed in myself too. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So like in terms of getting myself to do things, if I have certain expectations, I know I need to like deal with myself even in a different way. Yeah, super awesome book. I really like it.
Wow, that's fascinating. Two things. One, I've never heard of that book before. And the other thing is that sounds amazing. Like that sounds like definitely a must read for me and a must read for everybody, because really understanding your own tendencies, understanding the tendencies of others at some level. I do incorporate that with the, with the partnership conversations that we have and the sales conversations we have. We do
Yeah,
that to a point, but then understanding that as a deeper level is super, super powerful. So I'm going to add that to the must read list for sure. Thank you for that. That was
yeah. And she
amazing.
also has a quiz as well, so you can kind of see which tendency you are. So when you read the book, you can know to pay attention to
Oh,
that
there you
stuff.
go. So
Yeah,
self-assessment as well, and you can kind
yeah,
of see not only, but you could use that with others too. You could have them take the assessment and you could compare that and just kind of see, and then use that in formulating your communication with that person, right? So
exactly,
there you go.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah,
We just brainstormed some great uses for that, great applications. Well, we'll put all the links to that book there beneath the video and in the podcast show notes as well. Elisa, thank you. This has been
yay.
amazing, and so you know, I hope our audience has taken away a lot from this, and start thinking about what your next steps are. And if you don't know what your next steps are, then I think there's a couple of great next steps for you. One is to download Elisa's launch planning blueprint, and also reach out to her as well and see, have a conversation. She's great to work with. We are super grateful to have you in our world. Any
For having
final
me.
advice or words of wisdom you want to leave our audience with before we sign off?
Um, I would say, live in the place of good enough and just sort of start now and start taking those first steps and get that ball rolling. Because sometimes, we can get stuck in perfectionism or having to get all these things done. And so just, good enough and just start making those steps and start making forward progress, because that's the only way that you're going to really be super successful in your business. You always got to be moving forward. And if you know what that path kind of looks like, then it's the road to success. So get
Yeah,
started.
nothing gets done if you're stopped, for sure. Well, that's beautiful advice to end this episode by. So, thank you. And
Thank
to
you.
my audience, thank you. Go get Elisa's launch planning blueprint, reach out to Elisa. And I want you to think about one thing that you learned in this episode today and take action on that one thing. And it doesn't have to be perfect action. Just take that action and get momentum. And when you get momentum, then you can speed up and things will move a lot faster for you. So, in the meantime, never ever give up on your big dream. The only way to fail is to quit. So keep moving forward, everybody. This has been the Creative Collaboration Show with Chuck Anderson. We will see you on the next one, everybody. Thank you.